You know that one person who just drains you, the one who constantly complains, criticizes, or makes everything about them? Yeah, we all have someone like that in our lives. And if you don't set boundaries, they will control your energy, your mood, and even your confidence. So today, we're going to talk about exactly how smart, successful, and emotionally strong people handle toxic people without the drama, without the guilt, and without losing their minds. Because the truth is, you can't always cut these people out, but you can take back your power. Let's get into it. Toxic people don't always walk into your life wearing warning labels. Sometimes they come disguised as friends, coworkers, even family, people you care about or spend time with regularly. That's what makes them so difficult to spot at first. But the first step to dealing with them like a smart, emotionally grounded person is learning how to recognize the signs of toxicity before it chips away at your mental peace. Toxicity shows up in patterns, not one-off moments. It's not about someone having a bad day or being moody once in a while. We all go through that. A toxic person operates in a way that consistently drains your energy, makes you question your worth, or manipulates your emotions to their benefit. You'll notice that after interacting with them, you often feel exhausted, anxious, or even angry. Your gut might be screaming that something's off, but your mind tries to rationalize it because they're a longtime friend or someone close to you. That hesitation is natural, but it's also the first barrier you have to push past if you want to protect your peace. One major red flag is chronic negativity. Toxic people love to dwell in problems, not solutions. They complain constantly, criticize everything around them, and rarely have anything positive to say. And here's the kicker: they expect you to be their emotional dumping ground. They'll offload their problems on you, but when you need support, they're nowhere to be found. Over time, that one-sided emotional labor starts to weigh heavy. You find yourself dreading their calls, avoiding their messages, or bracing yourself mentally before every interaction. Another big clue: manipulation disguised as care. Toxic individuals are often masters of guilt tripping. They'll twist conversations in a way that makes you feel responsible for their emotions. If you try to set a boundary, they make you feel selfish. If you call them out, suddenly you're the problem. This kind of emotional manipulation is subtle but powerful. It's how they maintain control. You start walking on eggshells, afraid to speak your truth or advocate for yourself because you don't want to upset them. Toxic people also have a pattern of disrespecting your boundaries. You tell them what you're not comfortable with, and they ignore it. You say no, and they pressure you until you say yes. Whether it's your time, your space, or your energy, they believe they're entitled to it. And instead of acknowledging your limits, they see them as obstacles to be pushed past. That's not just inconsiderate, that's invasive. It tells you loud and clear that your needs are not a priority to them. Then there's the issue of constant drama. Toxic individuals often thrive in chaos. If there isn't a problem, they'll create one. They stir conflict, gossip, and pit people against each other just to feel important or in control. And if you're in their circle, you'll get pulled into that whirlwind, whether you like it or not. Smart people recognize that drama is a distraction. It keeps you reactive instead of proactive. And when your mental energy is constantly being hijacked by someone else's emotional chaos, it becomes nearly impossible to focus on your own growth. And lastly, toxic people rarely take accountability. They'll make excuses, shift blame, and deny responsibility at every turn. Apologies, when they come, are often half-hearted or laced with justification. "I'm sorry you felt that way," instead of, "I'm sorry for what I did." This lack of accountability is a dead giveaway, because someone who can't own their behavior is someone who won't change it. You'll end up stuck in a loop, same problem, different day, if you keep expecting them to do better when they refuse to even admit they've done wrong. Recognizing toxicity isn't about judging others. It's about protecting your mental, emotional, and even physical well-being. When you start to see the patterns clearly, you gain the power to respond from a place of strength instead of constantly reacting from a place of pain. Smart people don't wait until the damage is done. They learn to trust their instincts, observe behavior over time, and call things what they are. Because the sooner you identify toxicity, the sooner you can stop it from taking root in your life. Once you've identified someone as toxic, the next smart move isn't to confront them in a fiery showdown or cut them off dramatically. It's to detach emotionally and start responding with clarity and control. Toxic people feed off emotional reactions. They want you to get upset, defensive, or guilt-ridden because your emotional response gives them power. But when you detach and respond instead of react, you shift the dynamic completely. You become unshakable. Detaching emotionally doesn't mean you stop caring or become cold. It means you stop allowing that person to influence your emotional state. Think about it. How many times have you walked away from a conversation with a toxic person feeling frustrated, misunderstood, or emotionally drained? That's not a coincidence. It's a cycle they rely on. The more reactive you are, the easier it is for them to manipulate you. So detachment is your shield. It allows you to observe their behavior without getting pulled into it. This process starts with awareness. You have to become conscious of your emotional triggers, what they say or do that sets you off, and begin to create space between their behavior and your reaction. That space is where your power lives. Instead of jumping to defend yourself or trying to prove a point, you learn to pause, breathe, and ask, is this worth my energy? Most of the time, the answer will be no. Because when someone's goal is to get a rise out of you, the smartest thing you can do is not give them what they want. Responding rationally is about staying grounded. It's choosing your words and actions deliberately, not out of emotion, but out of intention. For example, if someone tries to guilt trip you for setting a boundary, like declining an invitation or saying no to a favor, you don't have to explain yourself endlessly. A simple, calm and time not available for that is enough. You don't owe a performance. You don't need their approval. When you stay calm and clear, it disarms them. There's nothing for them to argue with because you're not giving them drama to latch onto. This level of composure doesn't come overnight. It's a practice. You have to train yourself to stop taking things personally, even when they're meant to be personal. Toxic people love to make you feel like you're the problem. They project their insecurities, deflect blame, and twist facts. If you engage emotionally, it becomes a war of words that never ends. But if you stay neutral, if you refuse to take the bait, you stay in control. You're no longer dancing to their tune. Another aspect of emotional detachment is accepting that you can't change them. One of the biggest traps smart people avoid is thinking that if they explain things better, show more empathy, or try harder, the toxic person will finally get it. They won't. Toxic behavior is often rooted in deep insecurity, control issues, or emotional immaturity. It's not your job to fix them. Your job is to protect your peace. When you stop trying to change them and focus instead on managing your own responses, everything shifts. Also, recognize that walking away from certain conversations is not weakness, it's wisdom. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response. Silence can't be twisted. Silence doesn't escalate. It simply draws a line. Toxic people hate silence because they can't control it. But for you, it can be a sanctuary, a way to reclaim your energy without ever having to raise your voice. Over time, when you master the art of detaching emotionally and responding rationally, you become bulletproof to their tactics. Their drama doesn't shake you. Their words don't define you, and their presence doesn't dictate your peace. You show up with clarity, speak with confidence, and move with purpose. That's how smart people win, not by engaging in the chaos, but by rising above it. Once you've learned to detach emotionally from toxic people, the next powerful move is setting clear and firm boundaries. Boundaries aren't about being rude, distant, or selfish. They're about knowing your worth and protecting your emotional and mental space. Smart people understand that boundaries are not walls, they're filters. They don't keep everyone out, but they do decide what kind of behavior is allowed in. And when it comes to dealing with toxic people, boundaries are your most reliable line of defense. The challenge is that toxic individuals often push boundaries or pretend they don't exist. They test limits, ignore your requests, and expect you to bend to their needs at the expense of your own. That's why it's not enough to simply have boundaries. You have to be willing to communicate them directly and enforce them consistently. You might say something like, I'm not comfortable having that conversation right now, or as you raise your voice, I'm going to end this discussion. These statements aren't dramatic, they're honest. And they put the responsibility back where it belongs, on the person crossing the line. It's important to understand that boundaries aren't just something you express to others, they start internally. You have to decide for yourself what you will and won't tolerate. That means getting clear on your values, your time, your emotional bandwidth, and your non-negotiables. Ask yourself, what drains me? What behavior do I keep excusing that I know I shouldn't? Where am I constantly compromising my peace just to keep someone else happy? The answers to those questions will show you exactly where boundaries need to be set. Now, the tricky part, when you first start setting boundaries, especially with people who are used to crossing them, you will face resistance. Toxic individuals don't like limits because limits threaten their control. They may react with anger, guilt tripping, silent treatment, or even manipulation. They might accuse you of being selfish or say you've changed, and you know what? That's okay. That's part of the process. In fact, their discomfort is proof that the boundary is working. Smart people don't back down in the face of pushback. They stay calm, firm, and consistent, knowing that boundaries are not up for debate. Consistency is everything. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to set boundaries is letting things slide just this once. But every time you allow someone to cross a line you've already drawn, you teach them that the line doesn't matter. Smart people understand that you can't expect others to respect boundaries you don't respect yourself. If you say you're not going to engage in arguments, and then you do, you've already undone your work. Holding firm, even when it's uncomfortable, is how you build credibility and earn respect, not just from others, but from yourself. And here's something crucial. Boundaries are not punishments. They're not about controlling other people's behavior. They're about controlling your own environment. You're not saying you can't talk to me like that. You're saying, if you talk to me like that, I will leave the conversation. That's not control, it's self-respect. You're giving people the freedom to behave however they want, but you're also giving yourself the freedom to remove yourself from situations that are disrespectful or damaging. Another important piece of this is emotional boundaries, especially when toxic people try to offload their problems onto you. It's okay to support someone, but there's a difference between support and being someone's emotional dumping ground. Smart people draw a clear line. They might say, I care about you, but I'm not in a place to take this on right now. That's not cold, it's mature. Because when you constantly absorb someone else's negativity, it begins to shape your own mental landscape. Setting boundaries is one of the most empowering skills you can develop. It teaches you to prioritize your well-being without guilt, to communicate your needs with clarity, and to protect your peace in any environment. And while it may feel uncomfortable at first, it becomes second nature over time. Toxic people may not like it, but your job isn't to make them comfortable. Your job is to make sure you're not sacrificing your health, happiness, or sanity to keep the peace. And that's what smart people understand deeply. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. They're the foundation of every healthy relationship you'll ever have, especially the one you have with yourself. One of the most powerful things smart people learn when dealing with toxic individuals is this: don't take the bait. Toxic people thrive on reaction. They say things that are deliberately provocative, twist the truth, play the victim, or poke at your insecurities, not because they want resolution, but because they want control. The moment you get angry, defensive, or overly emotional, they've won. They pulled you into their game, and now you're playing by their rules. That's why staying in control of your reaction is key. It's not about silence or passivity. It's about knowing when to respond, how to respond, and most importantly, when to walk away. Toxic people are experts at triggering emotional responses. They know exactly what buttons to push, and they often do it with subtlety. It might be a snide remark, a passive-aggressive comment, or an intentional misunderstanding. The goal is to throw you off balance. If they can get you to overreact, they shift the focus from their toxic behavior to your emotional response. Suddenly, you're the one being too sensitive or overreacting, and the real issue gets buried under a pile of drama. Smart people don't fall for this. They know that every reaction is a choice, and they choose calm over chaos. Staying in control doesn't mean suppressing your emotions, it means mastering them. When someone says something cruel or manipulative, your initial instinct might be to fire back or defend yourself. But smart people pause, they take a breath, they assess whether the comment even deserves a response. Not everything does. In fact, many things don't. Silence can be a powerful response, not because you're afraid to speak, but because you've decided the conversation isn't worth your energy. And when you do respond, it's with clarity and intention, not heat and emotion. The key is to stop needing validation from the person trying to invalidate you. Toxic individuals often rely on a dynamic where you feel the need to explain yourself, defend your actions, or prove your point. But the truth is, they're not listening to understand, they're listening to manipulate. You could be the most articulate person in the world and still not get through to someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. Smart people understand that they don't owe anyone a long explanation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "Hi, I see things differently," and leave it at that. Another tactic toxic people use is gaslighting, making you doubt your perception of reality. They'll deny things they said, twist your words, or act like you're imagining the problem. This can be incredibly disorienting, especially if you're someone who values fairness and open communication. But instead of arguing to prove you're right, smart people keep receipts, mental or literal. They don't rely on the toxic person's version of the story. They trust their own memory, intuition, and experience. And most importantly, they don't get dragged into endless debates. Because the goal isn't to be right, it's to be free. A major part of staying in control is also learning how to disengage. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to stay on the phone with someone who's yelling at you. You don't have to respond to every text message that's filled with guilt or manipulation. Smart people know how to exit a conversation with dignity. They say what needs to be said, then they step back. Not out of fear or avoidance, but out of self-respect. Because staying in control means knowing that you don't owe anyone access to your peace. And here's the truth. The more control you gain over your reactions, the more powerless toxic people become. They can't use guilt, blame, or chaos to manipulate you if you don't give them the fuel. You become emotionally untouchable, not in a cold or distant way, but in a strong, grounded way. You know who you are, you know what matters to you, and you don't let someone else's dysfunction dictate your behavior. Refusing to take the bait is not about ignoring problems or pretending everything is okay. It's about rising above the noise. It's about choosing your battles, conserving your energy, and standing in your truth without getting pulled into their storm. That's what smart people do. They stay in control, protect their peace, and keep moving forward, no matter how loud the distractions become. Dealing with toxic people is not just about how you respond in the moment. It's also about how much access you give them to your life. One of the smartest strategies emotionally intelligent people use is limiting their exposure to toxic individuals. They understand that energy is finite. You only have so much time, focus, and emotional capacity in a day. And if someone is constantly draining that with negativity, manipulation, or drama, you're giving away your most valuable resource. That's why smart people are intentional about who they allow into their inner circle and how often those people get to influence their world. Toxic individuals tend to be relentless. They want to be involved in every conversation, every decision, every little detail of your life, not because they care, but because control gives them a sense of power. They thrive on being central to your emotional attention, whether it's through conflict, guilt, or constant dependency. But the truth is, you are not obligated to let someone's presence take up that much room in your life. Smart people learn to create space to breathe, think, and live without being constantly pulled into someone else's emotional chaos. Sometimes that means reducing physical contact, spending less time with the person, declining invitations, or making plans that don't include them. It's not about being rude or confrontational. It's about being protective of your peace. You don't need to make a dramatic announcement or explain your every move. You simply start making different choices. If someone drains you every time you meet less. If someone ruins your day every time you talk less. It can be that simple, and it can be that powerful. In other cases, limiting exposure might mean emotional distancing